Welcome to the North American Star League. This is going to be division number 3. And we are so happy to have you guys here. But before we get too much further, let's go ahead and do some introductions. As always, I am Jeff In Control Robinson. And to my right, no, that's not a model. That's not even just a pro gamer. That's actually a commentator. Andre Gretor Picture. How you doing, buddy?
Really good, man. And I am so glad you're back. Not that I didn't like yesterday, but it's good to have you back. Congratulations, by the way.
Blood Brother 1 to Blood Brother 2.
Blood Brother 1 to Blood Brother 2.
And thank you very much. I appreciate that. Yeah, I was pretty happy with that series, but, you know, every day is a new war. Got to keep trending, got to keep working at it. But enough about me and my successes and how awesome I might or might not be. We are so happy to have you guys here. Just as always, we want to thank you, whether you're watching this on the low-quality stream or the high-quality stream. Thank you for joining us. You guys are all contributing, you know, in different ways, but still, we appreciate having you guys here. Let's go ahead and let's talk about the players. Who's playing today?
Well, match number 1, we have Hey Pro versus Slush. We have Nada versus Moonglade in game number 2. Game number 3 features DDE versus Axlav. Game number 4 is Naniwa versus Kwai Rice. And to anchor it all in, we have Squirtle versus Strelok as our last match. Yeah, that's pretty
exciting.
Match.
That's exciting. Now, I know we had some walkovers, and everyone, cross your fingers. Let's cross our cosmic fingers. All players here.
Boom.
These are amazing matchups. I'm really excited, especially for Startho versus, Squirtle versus Strelok. But before we get into the in-depth analysis on those, let's go ahead and talk about some other things. Sure. Let's go ahead and go to the maps. The maps for this play-day are going to be Crossfire, Backwater Gulch, and Tal'Darim Altar. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I have some exciting news.
What is the news?
The news is they are completely updated. Wow. This is what everyone's using. So we're really excited to have them because what that means is that there's not going to be any more discussion about, well, close position Metalopolis, thing of the past, guys. It's gone. So our map pool, I can say, Gretorp and I have taken a look at it. It is pretty darn stellar. We're very happy about it, and we can push forward. Now let's talk about the maps a little bit more in depth. Now that we got that all out of the way, that's nice. The first map's going to be Crossfire. This map we've seen quite a few times, actually, at this point. And it's an interesting starting place for this series because there are people that feel very strong that they don't like it, and there are people that feel very strong that they do like it.
Well, I mean, it does seem to, I think, favor a little bit of Terran and Protoss, more so than Zerg, just because Zerg doesn't have a reliable area of effect damaging unit. Their only area of effect unit is the Infestor, and everybody knows that's a terrible unit. So, generally,
You crazy?
No, of course, just Infestors haven't been a huge play of Zerg, or a huge part of Zerg play. And more so, it's a lot more accessible to get the Terran, the Siege Tanks, and the Colossus for Protoss. Rather than it's kind of a gas dump for Zerg, and it can be hard at times, but we have seen it done plenty of times. Hopefully we will see it in Crossfire, but we do see that. On top of that, we see a hard-to-take third base, which Zerg generally need a third base more so than the other races. And it's kind of out there.
A bit of a pickle.
Yeah, it's a little out there. So, I mean, there are small advantages, I would say, but barely any advantages for Terran and Protoss. But I don't think it's overwhelming, and I think still the better player can come out on top, percentage-wise, more so than the weaker player.
Now, this is week 2, so we've talked a lot about the maps, and it's going to be no different with Crossfire. But so what I want to do is I want to branch off and talk a little bit more about specific matchups in this group on these maps.
Sure.
And starting with Crossfire, the only ZV non-Z, because we do have a Zerg Berserk to kick things off of Hey Pro versus Slush, is Nada versus Moonglade.
Yeah.
And I think one of the specific things to look at in that matchup is that tier right in front of the natural. And we've talked a lot about that too, but specifically here, Nada has shown he really likes the bio play with the Marines. We haven't seen his TVZ yet. We've only seen his TVT, but if that's any kind of indicator, he's got fantastic control. And Moonglade has to be very careful. If a Terran gets set up there, tanks, Marines, heaven forbid, a bunker or missile turrets, like we've actually seen Boxer execute in TSL. He did a fantastic job against Fnatic MSI Sen, moving up his push, but also bringing SCVs to produce bunkers and turrets.
Yeah.
I think that's something that's really underrated. A lot of Terrans will definitely do the slow push with tanks and Marine, but they won't set up stacked defenses as well. So It'll be interesting to see if Nada does get to employ that, but that is a point of contention that you do have to look for. If it does get to the place where the Terran kind of entrenches themselves and makes themselves fortified there, it's going to be really hard for the Zerg to crack one uphill.
Well, I always look at this map in two different... Well, I'm going to do it from both the standpoints of the races. So Terran, what they're looking to do is get that Marine Tank Bio Ball and just push straight up, do a death push almost, and just win with it. Because you can be very efficient, again, with bunkers and turrets, static defense. It's very efficient to do that. So that's what Terran's really gearing for. Whereas Zerg, they have to be a little bit more clever. Now, Mutalisks are going to be very strong in this map. Why? It's because there are so many ramps. It's, you have to twist and turn. Exactly. So your mobility is super strong. And it really helps to get in there, those close positions, so you can actually take advantage of the small placements of the Marines. They can't really circle around the siege tanks as much, so you can actually get in. If the siege tanks are near a ledge, you can get in, snipe them, and also you can attack the main natural, whatever it might be. So the question is, how do we get a third? We get a third by actually doing sort of a Kyrix style. So you go mass circling banelings, take advantage of the natural, say, okay, you have to tech a little bit later, get a lot more static defense up. And while that's happening, because your tech is delayed, your push is going to come out later, I'm going to go take my third. And I think that's the way I think personally the best way Zerg can play on that map. Just get those Zergling banelings, threaten that push in the beginning because of the open natural, take your third, and then start to develop your Mutalisks after that.
I agree. So look for that Moonglade Nada matchup. A lot of what Greetorb's talking about could take shape, or we could be completely wrong and we'll look silly. But either way, I'm still excited. Now, the second map is going to be Backwater Gulch. This is a map where, depending on where you spawn, there can be, well, precarious situations for you. If you are 12, or not 12 o'clock, but more like 3 o'clock, and, well, okay, top right, bottom right. I guess I'm just going to avoid numbers entirely because I'm really bad with those. That can be precarious for the player on the bottom because they'll have to, their natural is leaning towards their opponent, whereas the opponent's natural is actually tucked away from their opponent. And that's, you always want to expand away from the person you're playing against. Typically speaking, I mean, there are situations where Terran would like to kind of push the issue because they do have planetary fortresses and other stack defenses that are natural supplementary facets of an expansion. But for the most part, specifically Zerg, they want to expand further and further away from their opponent because it's the mobility of their units that they're actually looking to capitalize on. So Backwater Gulch does have that kind of element at play with that map, so be sure to look for that. But we only do have the Nada versus Moonglade. Everything else is Nano versus Quairai, Squirtle versus Straylock. Those are 2 PVTs. And then a Zerg versus Zerg. Well, actually, it's 3. There's DDE versus Axlab. So a lot of PVT today. So let's go a little bit into the PVT matchup. And conveniently enough, we have a Protoss and a Terran player. For me personally, looking at that map, I don't feel any kind of particular, like, okay, here's what I really have to focus on in PVT. Or here's what I'm really afraid of in TVP. There are important points that we've talked about in the past, like the towers, the expansions being vulnerable. But one thing to note is that this is our smaller map, so rush distances are shorter.
That's the big thing. If you can keep up the aggression, for me at least, you can keep up the aggression, it can get you into mid-game pretty nicely. And on top of that, what I like to do, because we have such short distances, it makes it very easy to get Thors and to traverse a map. Not if you're in cross positions. I don't think it's as good. So going in early Thor play, which is generally not too good because your army isn't mobile. If you're in close positions, you just walk it over there, and it becomes a huge battering ram. That in conjunction with Marine Marauders and Vikings, Medivacs, the standard bio, I think that's a really potent combination. And we don't see it so much because, you can always go around other ways, and it's very hard to get into position with Thors. But I think Backwater Gulch definitely leaves a chance for that.
I gotta agree with you. I think the Thor is an interesting unit to look for here, as well as the tank. There's a lot of expansions that are accessible by high ground in near proximity to them, be it the minerals. It's kind of the third base for every main. There's a mineral line that can be reached by the high ground behind it. So if a player does take that third as their 4th or 5th base, etc., there's very high chances for harass. It'll be interesting to see how it pans out. There are also high yield minerals in the middle of this map. Not every map does have high yield. We'll actually talk about that in the next map. But on this one there are. And what those represent is kind of almost like an end game plan. If a player can take the high yield and hold it, and this is not unique really to this map, but it is worth noting, especially in PvT, it is tough to dislodge them, especially the Terran. And I don't mean to sound Protoss biased or not, but when you throw down a Planetary Fortress there and you have tanks, and that's kind of your macro area, that's really difficult to dislodge them. Now, conversely, when a Protoss or Zerg takes it, it can actually be sieged by those tanks from across distance. So it's not a Terran favored map by all means, but these are things that we need to look for, and our players have been training to to take into account, because if they do get into that position, they have no one to blame but themselves. That's something they got to prepare for.
Yep. So going into map number 3, we're going to have Tal'Darim Altar. This is considered probably the largest map of this map pool. We start with medium, then small, then this is definitely mega big, as it was updated. So let's go ahead and talk about the updates, because I think that's a pretty important factor. First off, the gold expansions, goodbye. They're gone. Destructible rocks, they're gone too. And the third for every single main is cut in half, so you have 5 mineral patches and only 1 gas. And I guess let's go ahead and talk a little bit why they were changed.
It's
like this.
much more Zerg friendly. The Destructible Rocks made it a really hard map for Zerg to say, oh, you fast expanded, I need to take that fast expansion, but I've got 4 Zerglings, so I've got about an hour and a half to kill before the rocks are gone. With that out of the way, it's much, much more Zerg favored. I mean, we don't have a PvZ today, but one of the problems with that was a Protoss could fast expand, then go Void Ray Phoenix as an opener, and if they took that third away from that third spot, the Void Ray would get there before the Queen and Creep could reach them, and they'd be in a lot of trouble. So, again, we don't have that necessarily in the function of this game day, but that was something that was really problematic for the Zerg players. Now, the other thing about this map that does make it difficult for Zerg, but is being mitigated to a certain extent, is the size of the map. It's the mega big map. It's a very large map, which meant that creep spread was very difficult to establish, which meant, again, expanding, defending expansions, and being reactive to their opponent was hard to manage. So with those destructible rocks out of the way, at least the Zerg has the economic means to go ahead and kind of compensate for the difficulties of getting around this map, essentially. And I feel good about that. I would rather have a map pool where every map is pretty darn balanced and pretty good for everybody, as opposed to, well, okay, there's that one map, though, that if we have, So I'm happy they changed it, but let's talk about the specifics here, too. I'm actually kind of interested to see a ZVZ on this map. We have seen some ZVZs here, but here's a couple interesting elements at play. It's such a big map, and there's no ramp leading directly into the main to defend it, that I really feel like speedling openings are strong, but also because it's such a big map, expanding is really common. But that's problematic, because if their opponent's going like Ling Baneling, or even a Roach opener, we did see Slush execute a Roach opener against Moonglade to high success, was able to execute that very well. It can raise some problems.
Yeah, I think the more defensive Zerg might win out. Of course, there are a lot of options. Still, you have to keep in mind, I mean, Banelings don't really matter because you morph the Banelings when Zerglings get into position. But I think the more defensive Zerg should win out on this map. I think, I mean, it only gives you a couple seconds, like 5-10 seconds to traverse the map, more so than regular maps. But I think it's enough to get, that spine crawler down, to get queens into position. Because you're going to have these overlord highways to see everything that's going on. So that's what is the reaction time. You have more reaction time, so you can get into position. Of course, I'm assuming that both of them are doing very safe builds, so they can defend. It's within their builds to actually defend for things, for all variances of things. But assuming that, I think the defender will have the advantage in this match, and I'm really hoping it goes into an endgame, mid-game, endgame, as Zerg vs. Zerg and mid-game, endgame is pretty epic battles, man.
Epic battles, sure. Before we get into players specifically, let's talk a little bit about PvT, because that's obviously this is the day of PvT. And one match I want to highlight for this map in particular is DDE from 6jax versus Evil Genius's Axelab. I feel like if it does go to Game 3, this will be an interesting map, because DDE is all over the place. I've seen him use tanks, I've seen him use just Bio Viking, and I've seen him do everything in between. And then Axelab, nobody can say, well, here's what Axelab does. He's off the wall too. So in this game number 3 with that low ground facing the natural, really big, high contention point for sieging. There's also a lot of drop points. The main is massive. The natural is expansive. And then there's a lot of bio play. The ramp is a 2 force field ramp, which means that it takes just that little extra oomph to block it off, as well as kind of the back alleyway leading into the third. That's a, I don't know, 2 or 3 force field kind of alleyway, but there's no ramp there, which actually mitigates the effect of the force field to a certain extent. So it'll be interesting to see. What do you think about that matchup?
Well, I actually had the pleasure of playing against Axlav. We did a lot of maybe 6, 7 practice games, I think yesterday or the day before.
I'm jealous.
And
I feel a little bit cheated on, actually.
QQ.
I should have played Terran. My Terran's fantastic.
Oh, wow. I doubt that.
It is terrible.
Well, he destroyed me.
Yeah,
He
he's
destroyed
good,
me.
man.
Every
He's
single
really good.
game. 6 or 7 out of the 7 games, he destroyed me. I didn't win a single game. I did Marine Tank against him. Every single game he wanted to practice a little bit against it. He said that's the strongest style. But I guess it's the strongest style for him to beat. Because I felt silly. Straight up silly, man. I had like 30 tanks. He's like, LOL. And he just walked in. He's looking really good, though.
What was he opting for? Phoenix?
No,
Immortals?
he just did regular, Zealot, Stalker, Sentry, Colossus,
Yeah.
and then he hallucinated Immortals, which was pretty,
okay.
pretty dirty indeed. Instead of getting the Guardian Shield, but I mean, he was looking in great shape. He's just all over the place. He plays a more defensive sort of PvT, which is rightfully so. He takes his bases, makes sure his army composition is maximized, especially on Tal'Dari Malter. That was his style. It's like, I'm going to take my corner of the map. You can go do your own stuff. And when I push out, you better be ready for me. And I'm expecting that type of play from Axlov. He isn't the really highly super aggressive player that we see sometimes from Protoss. Well, actually, very minimally, but I think Axlov has a good chance. I'm actually favoring him going into this.
He's up here though. We got to talk about him a little bit in the player thing. That's Matt
sorry.
Malter, Tank Marine. Okay.
I didn't say anything.
Creature's excited. I'm excited.
I'm so excited.
Well, let's get into the PvT run. It's going to be the first 2 matchups are not PvT, and then it's PvT, PvT, PvT. And last but not least will be Startail Squirrel versus Straylock from Team Mouse. I am really excited for this. We got kind of robbed last week.
Yeah.
We did not get to see the Warship, a.k.a. Straylock, play. And he was fired up about it. We saw that interview. But he is a fantastic Terran player hailing from the Ukraine. Does very well in all the European tournaments. Pretty much, I mean, I don't need to distinguish. He does well in every tournament he plays in. But he's going to be going up against Startail Squirtle, who did beat Axlav from Team Evil Geniuses 2-1 in the week previous. And he looked fantastic. Squirtle has made... I've actually been corrected. He's not S-Class. In fact, I always do this. I always throw myself right into that specific problem. I think he's not even A-Class, but he is a top Korean player. What do you think of this matchup? What do you think of Squirrel versus Straylock?
Well, I'm very biased.
Don't.
Okay.
As a commentator, you cannot be biased.
Me and Strelak actually exchanged strategies back in the beta.
Yeah.
We've been friends for quite a long time, and I really am looking forward to his play. His Terran vs. Protest style, it's not anything out of the ordinary, but it's great play. It's just robust, standard, amazing play, I should
He
say.
likes a lot of drops, I think.
He's open to it, yes.
He's not necessarily dependent on
Yes,
it.
he doesn't depend on it, but he uses it. It's in his utility belt. You know, his Batman utility belt. He's just all over the place. The best part is his ghost play. I really like his ghost play.
Actually, it is quite good.
Everybody says, oh, yeah, of course you need ghosts in your army composition, but how many times do you go into a game, you see Mass Marine, Marauder, Medevac, Viking, that's it. That's it.
It happens.
And it happens all the time. But he makes sure he incorporates it. Even on 2-base, I've seen him do it. So I'm really looking forward to him. I think he has what it takes to take out Squirtle, who showed a very impressive performance against Axel last
calling
week.
it? 2-1?
2-0.
2-0 over Squirtle?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, you heard it there. We'll see. Squirtle, 1-0 in the group play, 2-1 in matches. A fearsome Korean Protoss. There's no way for me to really say, okay, here's what he's known for necessarily in PvT. He has done some things that are quite famous, but we're just gonna have to see. He knows as little about Strelok as he possibly can.
Yeah.
Strelok has not been to Korea. He's not participated in any Korean tournaments, and Squirrel has, as far as I can tell, his European experience has been limited, if at all. So we'll just have to wait and see how that turns out. I really like the maps for this. I feel like there's no, well, okay, that's a huge Protoss map or a huge Terran map. Especially with these updates, I really feel like we're in for a balanced matchup. Yep. Now, the matchup before that, and I'm actually quite excited about this because on paper, it's not that even. It is Dignitas Naniwa, I don't know what to call him. He's got to get a nickname pretty soon because he's an absolute monster. He just beast-moded MLG. I'll think about it, guys. I'll try to be the trendsetter on that one. Versus Fnatic MSI Kawhi Rice. And everyone knows that's kind of around the hardcore scene. Kawhi Rice does not like Terran vs. Protoss. He does not like it. He does not do very well. And Naniwa is a monster. So on paper, everyone's like, well, it's not that exciting. I'm sure Naniwa will just crush Kawhi Rice. But I'll tell you what. If last week is any indicator, I can, and you'll have to, either completely throw me under the bus or agree. I think Kawhi Rice is working really hard, and he's a mechanically sound, excellent player. I think he has what it takes to make people change their mind.
Yeah, well, being one of his teammates, I've actually got to see who he's training against. And of course, who else on Fnatic MSI is a Protoss player?
TT1.
TT1. That is his training